This is the initial training on Robert's Rules of Order. So I'm going to cover like the main concepts and chapters. This is the book. This is the current version. So the Roberts family, Robert was a general from the 1800s, and his family still owns the copyright on this, and they revise it every few years. So this is the last edition was 2011, and then this is the 2020. So the active one is the 12th edition. When you see RONR, it stands for Rules of Order Newly Revised. And so that's what the NR is for. So Robert's Rules of Order Newly Revised is this abbreviation. So in the OKGOP, the reason that Robert's Rules of Order matter is because our GOP bylaws, which are called the OKGOP rules, say that all questions of procedure and other matters affecting the Oklahoma Republican Party or any of its organizations, unit meetings, or conventions, which are not specifically covered in these rules, shall be governed by Robert's Rules of Order newly revised and the law of the state of Oklahoma, whichever may be applicable. And then if you go to Robert's Rules of Order, Section 2, paragraph 18, it says that this book is binding in all cases that it's not inconsistent with the bylaws. So the bylaws are the authority, and after that, Robert's Rules of Order is the authority. So it says that it's binding, and that's just important because you don't want to be able to pick from one section of the book and not the other. And it's very specific. And there's overarching principles, but then they've built this book out to cover a lot of other topics so that we have specific information on a bunch of different things. So Robert's Rules of Order is a version of parliamentary procedure. There's different manuals, like there's Mason's manual that's used in the Oklahoma legislature. Robert's Rules is used by a lot of churches and private organizations and societies. But the principles, like if you read Mason's rules, you'll see a lot of overlap because there's a lot of just fundamental parliamentary principles that apply across the board. It was originally developed by Thomas Jefferson. The order and the respect that we have in our legislatures and in our parliamentary procedure is an American principle, and that's why you'll hear them refer to, the senator this, or in Robert's Rules, you should always say like Mr. Smith or Chairman Smith, whatever, like calling them by titles, not by first names. All the communication you do is done through the chairman. So if you want to ask a question of another member, like let's say on a pending motion, you ask it through the chairman with an inquiry, and then the chairman refers it back to the member refers it back to the chairman. Obviously, it's all happening on the floor, but everything that happens is sent to the chairman, and that's just for order. So all of these principles of parliamentary procedure were originally started by Thomas Jefferson, and then General Roberts was a army general in the 1800s in the United States, and he ended up being put in the position of presiding officer over a lot of different groups and organizations. And so he started studying parliamentary procedure for himself, so he was better prepared to handle those situations. And then he eventually developed his own manual based on all his study and experience to help people have more orderly business. And actually, a lot of his experience came from the church. And you'll see churches, even today, like the Southern Baptist Convention, still operates under parliamentary procedure of Robert's Rules. So that's kind of the background on General Roberts. His story is all in the beginning. The introduction of the book shares his whole story, and it's very fascinating. His family still maintains to this day the manual and every new version. So you'll see that this version has Henry M. Robert III. And then as you read, they'll tell you which members of the Roberts family still are involved to this day. The purpose of Robert's Rules of Order is to conduct orderly business and to give each person a voice, but allow majority rule. So that's the origins of parliamentary procedure. Just as some guiding principles, this is from the very beginning of Robert's Rules. Committees are a deliberative assembly. And so that is a group of people having or assuming freedom to act in concert, meeting to determine in full and free discussion courses of action to be taken in the name of the entire group. Persons having the right to participate, that is members, are ordinarily free to act within the assembly according to their own judgment. So I actually believe that Robert's Rules of Order is a very Republican idea. It gives power to the people, gives voice to the people, usually through representation. Like in the Republican Party, the voters choose precinct officers, which sit on the county committee. The precinct officers on that committee choose county officers, or those county officers represent that county. And then the county officers gather in a state committee. And it's a very Republican form. And that's in line with Robert's Rules. And so all of that, committees are meant to be deliberative. This is something I think we've lost in a lot of our assemblies in both like the Southern Baptist Church and in other organizations, is we'd like to say, oh, let's have this committee fix this problem, when actually the group of people themselves are a deliberative body that could do the business. And if we understand Robert's Rules of Order, we can all do that business together, which I really enjoy to see when it works, and is something I'm very passionate about. But to do that, you have to understand these rules, because they allow even hundreds of people to do business together in an orderly way. For something to become the choice of the body, a proposition must be adopted by a majority vote. The majority vote is how the decision happens, but there's a lot of room along the way to give voice to the minority. Even just one individual can have voice on certain elements, and then the decision making is left to the majority. So fundamental principles always, again, this book gets very technical, but understanding just the basic premise that you have a right to speak, you have a right to be heard, and then the decision goes to the majority of that body is like kind of the filter through all of this that can be used. One thing I want to bring up is this is a little rule in Robert's Rules of Order 225. No matter how long established a custom is, once brought up, so once somebody recognizes like, oh, we're practicing a custom, but it's in conflict with a rule, then that custom has to be stopped being followed, and you have to follow the written rule. But it does take somebody calling it out. And this is the importance of individual members to study and understand our rules and make sure they're applied. Another overarching parliamentary principle is that of quorum. And Robert's Rules of Order defines quorum as the minimum number of members present to do business. And so they say it should be the number of members that you can reasonably be sure that will attend a meeting or come to a meeting in person. And most organizations have a quorum standard in their bylaws, which we do in the OKGOP bylaws. So for most committees, it's a majority. For a convention, I think it's a majority of those registered. For a precinct meeting, it's every person who shows up. And for the state committee, it's 100 members or more. But having that quorum number, once a quorum is present, you can do business. If there is not a quorum present, you can't do business. Again, going back to that principle that you need a certain number of members to make a decision that represents an entire group of people. In Robert's Rules, there is a standard order of business. I wanted to bring this up because the OKGOP does not have an order of business in our bylaws. And so we go back to Robert's Rules of Order. And this is standard, used in many societies. So that would be the reading and approval of minutes, the reports of officers, boards, and standing committees, the reports of special or ad hoc committees, special orders, unfinished business and general orders, and new business. I'm not going to define all of those, but it's really important to know that they all exist. I'll point out one thing is that new business is standard on an order of business, and new business, what I love about new business is it allows any member to bring business that they see as important. And going back to that fundamental principle that we're a deliberative assembly. If we're deliberative, we have to be able to deliberate. And to deliberate, we need an opportunity on an agenda to do that. And so you'll see in the OKGOP bylaws, there are certain things that need prior notice, removal of an officer, new rules, specific things like that. Elections may need prior notice. So some things you can't just bring up under new business, but a lot of other things, let's say there's somebody makes a report. So let's just give an example. Let's say a vice chairman of a county brings a report, that they realize that a certain event was coming up and should we participate? Well, you don't want to have to wait another 5 days to get that on the agenda of the next meeting. In most cases, right? There could be situations where you would have to do that, but in most cases, we should be able to deliberate and decide this. And so that would be an opportunity then once you get under new business to say, hey, I move that we participate, in this upcoming festival. And then somebody says, well, there's a registration fee that's due tomorrow for $50. Somebody else can say, oh, well, I move that we, tell the treasurer to make that fee. So this is why I really am a big proponent of new business being on an agenda, because it allows an assembly to be deliberative. Okay, so those were just some overarching principles of Robert's rules, that we're a deliberative assembly, that customs don't rule us, bylaws and rules rule us, and that quorum must be present, and then the order of business. Now let's talk about the rights of every individual person in that assembly. So the chairman must recognize any member who seeks the floor when entitled to it. And you'll see, I'll get into this later, every motion in Roberts tells you when you're entitled to bring that motion and how you need to be recognized and all of that. After a member has properly made a motion that is not dilatory, the chair must either state the question or rule it out of order for a specified valid reason, maybe it's requiring the wording to be clarified or submit in writing, or declare it's not before the assembly for lack of a required second. So the chairman should help. Somebody comes to the mic, they make a motion, the chairman should be like, oh yeah, sure, that's an appropriate motion, give it to the body, or help them figure out what's wrong with it and even help them restate it in the proper way. The chairman cannot hurry through the proceedings so quickly as to deprive the members of their right to debate and introduce secondary motions. The chair may never adopt not recognizing members or ruling that motions are not in order to merely speed up business. This is something some people will be like, oh, well, we don't want to take points of order right now. A point of order is always in order because it is dealing with a member's rights. And we'll talk about that later. So some of those things, allowing the members to do that business and allowing the rest of the body to vote on if that was appropriate or not. And if they want to take it as a motion of the assembly or not. But the chairman shouldn't just be ruling out of order unless it is out of order, not just to speed things up. And then the chair must give the maker of the motion the benefit of a doubt. This is what I love about an excellent chairman. They're actually trying to help the members do business. They're trying to say, oh, I see you want to amend that. Well, an amendment will be in order just a minute if you can wait, or, having these a little bit of a conversation to help members do business. So those are your rights. You have a right to make motions, and you have a right for a chairman to take proper motions and put those in front of the assembly. Okay, I'll cover this on the next slide. So the basic premise of Roberts is based on motions. So this is the steps that go into passing a motion. First, a member makes a motion. Then most motions are going to require a second, so it has to be seconded. The chairman then states that motion to the assembly. The question is on the motion to, participate in this upcoming event. Once the chairman states a motion to the assembly, that motion now belongs to the body as a whole, not the member as an individual. So technically, any amendments would need to be passed by everyone at that point and can't be done as friendly amendments. Friendly amendments would have to be done right in between those first two sections before it gets stated. Then everyone gets to debate that motion, starting with the member who made it. So the member who made it gets to speak first, and they get to speak one other time wherever they want to speak within the allotted debate time. Any debate should alternate for and against. You can have time limits on that debate. There's other ways to work that debate, but Roberts recommends that it alternate. Every other member outside of the motion maker only gets to speak one time. And so if you're working to get a motion passed, there's a lot of strategy that can go into who speaks in what order. The motion maker, obviously, I like the motion maker to speak first and speak strongly in support of their motion. And then I always save my second time to the mic if there's any specific things I need to give a rebuttal to. And so I just kind of hang around the mic and wait for that opportunity and let other people debate and just see how it plays out. So once debate ends, and it kind of depends on that particular meeting, if there's a limit on time on debate or a limit on speakers or however that works. Once it ends, then the chairman puts the question to the assembly. The assembly votes, normally by voice first. If the voice vote is clear, then it's considered pass or fail based on that. If it's not clear, then the chairman or a member can ask for a standing vote, a standing counted vote, the different types of votes to more specifically count out the numbers. And a good chairman will notice if it's close at all and will just immediately recognize those things. After the vote is finished, the chairman announces the result of the vote. So let's go to an example of this. You go to a microphone and say, Mr. Chairman, John Doe, Precinct 1, the chairman, you're recognized. I move that the society contribute to the centennial celebration. Someone else seconds that, second. And then the chairman says it is moved and seconded that the society contribute to the centennial celebration. Notice the wordings is exactly what the motion maker said. Is there any debate? At that point, debate takes place. When debate is done, the chairman says, seeing no further debate, all those in favor say aye, listens for the ayes. All those opposed say nay. And then he says the motion carries or the motion fails. That is the basic outline of a motion. So I'm going to get into types of motions, but do we have any questions before I do that? Okay. So there are 4 basic types of motions. And if you have Robert's Rules of Order, I'll just interject this here. Robert's Rules of Order has 63 sections. And if you look up here, every page has the section number. They also have chapters. So don't get confused. You want the section number, and then it has a colon, and it basically marks every single paragraph or topic with that number. And that's super helpful. The index is excellent. And so I use the index a lot, and then you can find things. So 63 sections. There's something else I was going to say on that. Oh, after the 63 sections, there's a table for determining types of motions. So this is also really helpful to understand. There's a bunch of tables back here. They can be really helpful to flip through for reference. They kind of tell you if you need a second for a motion, what amount of a vote, if it's a majority or 2/3 to pass it, all those types of things. So those are really helpful. Right now, I'm going to cover sections 6 and 7, which everyone should read. So section 6 covers the different types of motions. So there's 4 types of motions. First is the main motion. What I just demonstrated, that's a main motion. A main motion is a motion whose introduction brings business before the assembly. It can only be made when nothing else is pending, and it ranks lowest in the order of precedence. So the reason it technically ranks lowest is because all the other motions sit above it to help accomplish it and to help the assembly do business. So that's a main motion. The main motion is we want to do this. We want to spend this money. We want to tell this person this. We want to pass a resolution is a main motion. All of that is main motions. Next are these subsidiary motions. And I'm going to go through each of these motions in a minute. but subsidiary motions assist in treating or disposing of the main motion. Then after, so that's like amend, things like that. After that is privileged motions. Privileged motions can interrupt at almost any time because they're the points, like a point of personal privilege, like we need the air conditioning turned on, the microphone is broken, things like that are privileged motions. Deal with questions of procedure arising out of another motion. So that's what the 4 types of motions. Section 7, I'm flipping to it. Section 7 is just a page and a half. It demonstrates the standard descriptive characteristics of motions. And so what's really helpful about this, it kind of explains it. When you turn to any type of motion in Robert's rules, it will give you the standard characteristics. If it is in, when it is in order, whether it requires a second, whether it is debatable, whether it is amendable, what vote is required, whether it's a majority vote or 2/3 vote, if it can be reconsidered. So as you're learning motions, look at these standard descriptive characteristics because they'll help guide you on what you're looking at and if that motion has the different characteristics you need. This is bringing a resolution. So a resolution is a main motion. I already showed how to bring a main motion. I'm going to just go into the resolution for just a minute. And the reason is because resolutions are used a lot in the OKGOP. So a resolution is a main motion with a preamble. So it has preamble statements which say, you know, whereas our rules state, whereas this has happened, whereas we need this because. All of those are preamble statements. They're building your argument. They should be limited. You don't need a lot of them. And they shouldn't include things that are extremely controversial. They should be fairly factual. If you want to say like more personal experience or things like that, save that for debate. And then the resolution statement reads, resolved that such and such and such and such. And the resolve statement is technically the main motion. So here is a sample resolution. It says which committee is passing it. It says what it is about. It has whereas statements. These are based in written materials like the platform. Then it has a fact, whereas Senator Daniel authored this bill that did this. And then now, therefore, this is the main motion. You could pass it with just the main motion, but resolutions are used to give that little bit of backing, a little bit more information, and to put things in writing that are a little bit too complex, because remember, the chairman has to restate it. And so you want to make it as simple as possible for the chairman. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this committee that we condemn these actions for this reason. That is a resolution. Resolutions are passed with the same procedure because resolutions are main motion. So it's the same thing. You are recognized, and then you just, I move that we adopt a resolution that reads, you read it, then you give a copy to the chairman, you would debate it, and then after debate, you pass it. That's a resolution. They're just a main motion on paper, built out a little more for the purpose of things that are more complex. So I just wanted to cover that because they're used so frequently in the GOP, whereas, you know, a budget committee of a church may or may not use a resolution a whole lot. We do because we're a little more technical and we have like a guiding platform and some other elements like that. All right, so that's main motions. We've covered main motions. Now I'm going to cover subsidiary motions. So remember, the subsidiary motions assist in treating or disposing of the main motion. So here are the subsidiary motions. Postpone indefinitely means what it sounds like. Yeah, I move to postpone indefinitely. That's what that one is. Amend, I'm going to cover that in detail. Commit or refer means this is complicated enough. We want to send it to a committee to do research on and bring it back, or we want to refer this decision to, another subcommittee. Postpone to a certain time. So this is when you don't want, postpone indefinitely is used to kind of kill it. Like, let's not talk about it today and let's not commit to ever talk about it. Postpone to a certain time means we do want to talk about it. We're just going to decide when that is. Limit or extend limits on debate. So maybe you have a 3-minute limit on debate and you're like, this is so important, we need 5 minutes. Okay, you could do that. Or you could say, we need to limit this. That's what limit or extend limits of debate. Previous question. So I move the previous question or I move the question. That just ends debate and moves to a vote. Now, some of these, like previous question, requires a 2/3 vote because you're limiting the rights of the members, right? You're ending debate. And since you're ending debate, you may have taken away somebody's right to speak on it who wanted to. And so you have to have a 2/3 vote on that. Lay on the table is a motion. Just imagine that you guys are everyone's sitting at a table and there's, a pile of motions and we're picking them up and we're working on them. Lay on table just means we're laying it back on the table to deal with later. So those are your subsidiary motions. They help you deal with the main motion. All right, let's go. So I'm going to, I want to dig into amendments off of this list. Most of these are used fairly regularly. Amend is probably the most frequently used. And I want to talk about amendments because it's a little bit complex. So in the gray, you will see the main motion. And that is what I've already explained. In the red, you see the amendment to the main motion. And in the blue, you see the amendment to the amendment. This is the maximum levels you can go in Roberts. So you can have a main motion, an amendment to it, an amendment to the amendment. That's it. You can't have an amendment to the amendment of the amendment. That gets too complicated. So let's say someone puts forward a motion. I move that the society contribute to the centennial celebration. Then the next person's like, that's not specific enough. So they say, I want it to say $100. Okay, so now instead of, if they want to add to it, you have to vote on adding it before you vote on it. And so the $100 is now going to be the topic that we're debating. And then, while that's being debated, somebody starts to bring up, well, I don't even know if we have the money for this. And I don't, and there's debate going back and forth. So someone's going to try to solve this. This is what I love about the amendment process. It helps you solve problems and get a motion that the entire body can agree to, right? And so in the blue, you'll see this amendment to the amendment. So this one says, I move to amend the amendment to say, if the account balance is over $200. And so now you're going to vote on if the account balance is over $200 first. So now we've got to back ourselves back out of this train that we created, right? So we vote on the $200. And that if the balance is over $200, that passes. Okay, now we're voting on the amendment. Contribute $100 if the account balance is over $200. We're going to vote on that. That passes. So now we've got the amendment and the amendment to the amendment passed. Now we go back out to the main motion, which is in gray here at the bottom. We are now on the main motion with amendments. The society contributes $100 if the account balance is over $200 to the centennial celebration. And then we vote on it all as a whole. So that is how you do amendments. If you're struggling to follow it in your head, like use some arrows and take notes during a meeting to know which level you're on. But I love amendments because it can take a motion that's about to die and save it by listening to the debate that's going on and offering a helpful solution. So I'm a super big fan of amending motions on the floor. So now we are done with the subsidiary motions. Now let's cover the privilege motions, which are special matters of immediate importance. And these are allowed to interrupt the business. So there's just 5 of these. Call for the orders of the day. And so this can be used to get a meeting back on track. So we've had debate and some people, we don't even know what we're debating or at what level of an amendment we're on. If we're even in the right order of where this meeting is supposed to be at, calling for the orders of the day, reset to where this meeting is supposed to be. Raise the question of privilege. So it can be a question of personal privilege, or it can be a question of privilege for the entire body. This is, It's too hot in here. Can we get somebody to work on the AC? We can't hear anything. We can't see the screens. Or personal privilege, something relating just to you. So those are questions of privilege. Recess and adjourn, or fixed time to adjourn. Those are all pretty straightforward. Recess is like we're going to take a short break. Adjourn is ending the meeting. And fixing the time to adjourn is fixing the time to end the meeting. These are privileged, so they take higher precedent than the main motions or the subsidiary motions, which are dealing with business, because this needs to be dealt with quickly and it's an important issue. So those are your privilege motions. Now let's go to the last section, which is incidental motions. These deal with questions of procedure arising out of another motion. Incidental motions. This is a long list, but these are fairly straightforward. Point of order deals with rights of a member. Your rights are being violated. And you don't need a second. You don't need to say your name. You don't even need to make it to the mic. You just have to say point of order. It's a violation for the chairman to do this. The point of order, that person has a right to speak right now based on Robert's Rules of Order. Point of order, it is a properly made motion and should be brought to the floor. Point of order, point of order is a pretty widely used motion to bring rights back to the assembly. And what it does, so when you bring a point of order, the chairman has to rule on it. So he has to say, point of order, well taken. You're right, that person had an opportunity, should have the mic. Go ahead, Mr. So-and-so. Or they can say, point of order, not well taken. That person does not have a right to speak right now. We're going to move on. Once the chairman rules and makes that decision, then it can be appealed. I appeal the decision of the chair. And if you appeal the decision of the chair, the assembly then votes if they agree with you or if they agree with the chairman. The wording is, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? So if you vote yes, you vote with the chairman. If you vote no, you vote against the chairman. This is very helpful to use to make sure that the rights of members are not violated. So that's point of order and appeal. Next is suspension of the rules. To suspend the rules, it takes a 2/3 vote. And this is suspending the rules of the meeting. So most meetings are governed by certain rules. And there may be times when you don't want to work under those rules, and that is allowed as long as there's a 2/3 vote of the assembly that agrees to it. Objection to consideration of a question. Division of a question. So that means, you take a voice vote. So, the A's and nays, and then you can just call out the word division if you feel like it's too close and the chairman shouldn't call the vote yet. He should retake it, and at that point it forces a standing vote, and after the standing vote you can call division again and have a standing counted vote. The next one is consideration by paragraph. This could be used if you feel like there's a whole chunk of language, in a resolution or something that's being passed as a whole, and we need to look at some of this individually. There could be a lot of strategic reasons for that, but there's a motion for consideration by paragraph, which is one I actually have never used that one, but it's there. Motions relating to methods of voting in polls also falls under this. I'm not going to cover that in depth. Motions relating to nominations, same thing. All of this gets technical. What type of ballot you use, how many blanks are allowed per ballot, how they're counted, how they're collected, all of this. In fact, if you want to talk about election integrity, if we would just follow Robert's rules in our committees, we'd have a ton of election integrity. And I have friends who participated in the Iowa caucuses, and they followed some of this, and they actually have it's just a lot of eyeballs, a lot of opportunity to use a point of order if something's out of line. So anyway, there's a lot in here. The chapter on voting is extensive in Robert's Rules of Order and the section on nominations. Then you can request to be excused from a duty or requests and inquiries. A lot of these are not, again, point of order, appeal, and division, and suspend the rules are used pretty frequently. The rest of these, not as frequently. Okay, there you go. Those are all the types of motions. So main motions, subsidiary motions, privileged motions, incidental motions. we have 10 minutes. I think what I'm going to do, I have rights of a member, which is kind of how to play defense if you have a chairman who doesn't want to work with you. The way I learned Roberts is I had chairmen who did not want to work with me, who were lying to me, and members who are being dilatory. And dilatory is when a member is acting, they're just trying to frustrate business. They're not actually trying to do business. The purpose of committees is that and conventions is that we do business, and they're trying to stop that by whatever means possible. So I used a lot of points of order. You don't, all those motions I just showed you, I've, been doing this for almost a year on different committees, and I haven't even used all of those yet. You can pretty much stick to your basic motion, a motion, amendment, point of order, point of privilege, division. Like if you have those 5 down, you'll be able to deal with 85% of scenarios. Most of the other complex scenarios don't actually happen in the meetings themselves. They happen with how the meeting time is set, who calls the meeting, who's allowed to attend the meeting, if the meeting is recorded, if stuff is displayed, like all of these questions, which you get an opportunity to study beforehand. So I'm going to show you guys, if you basically know this sheet that I'm showing you right now, you'll be able to deal with most things. One other thing before I cover this sheet, the most important thing in Robert's Rules of Order is to speak up when you see an issue, because once it is passed, there's no going back. And there are a couple caveats of creative ways you can go back, but generally speaking, like for an example, you have an election. Once the next election starts, you can't go back to the previous election. So if you have any questions at all about how an election was conducted or the results, you need to raise those in the moment. And if you can't think of any other words to come out of your mouth, point of order is your go-to. Raise a point of order, it gives you the floor, and then work through the situation at hand. And this is why I like to have parliamentary teams, because one person can raise a point of order, somebody else can be looking up the specifics or counting ballots or whatever it needs to be. But point of order is to give you the rights to hold a chairman in check from running over his committee. And so that's why if you start with that, you usually can't go wrong. And if you find out you're in the wrong and they did everything correctly, you can just say, I'm sorry, I realize you were correct. Thank you so much. Sit down. And, it's just a little bit of ego, and a little bit of ego is better to spend than sitting quietly and missing the moment altogether. So with that in mind, these are motions to protect the rights of a member or an assembly. I'm not going to read all of this because we've already covered some of it. These are the rights of a member. I already covered this on the slideshow, so I won't cover that. This is your point of order. When a member thinks rules are being violated, all you have to do, I rise to a point of order, or even just a point of order. At that moment, you should be recognized. And then you say what your point of order is, right? So that's point of order. Again, if you don't like the chairman's decision, if they said that's not true, you can appeal it. An appeal will need a second. This is why I like to work in teams. An appeal will need a second. I appeal from the decision of the chair, and then it goes to a vote of the assembly. Now, these are not debatable, so you don't want to use it on something that you're going to have to explain to everybody because nobody's going to follow you. But it's usually pretty obvious if something like this is going down. And so that's when you would use this. There is one other thing, and I'm just going to briefly cover it. You can look it up in Roberts. If the chair is ignoring your point of order, you have the right to go directly to the assembly, turn around, face the entire assembly, and ask them to vote on it, because the chairman is violating your rights, and that shouldn't be happening. So that is the point of order. If you learn nothing else about Roberts, if you learn that, you'll be able to deal with most situations, and the rest comes in time as you keep practicing. Okay, the next is the question of privilege, which I've covered. This is the air conditioning, microphones. That can be used. This can also be used, let's say an election, you want to see the tally on the screen. That's a question of privilege. the assembly should be able to view the screen. Parliamentary inquiry. This is a very helpful one where you can say, what is the proper motion for this? So a chairman should actually help you make proper motions. And this is how to ask that question to the chairman. Point of information is to ask for information. It's not overly complex. You could ask the chairman for information. You can ask the member for information. This is information. The key with all of these is you're not debating, you're asking questions. So they should not be used to say things that should be done in debate. We should use the proper time for that. Okay, then we have division. If a vote is unclear, you call for a division. Again, because of the type of motion you don't have to be recognized, and that leads to that standing vote, and then that standing counted if you call it for it again. You can limit debate, you can extend debate, you can end debate by moving the previous question. I personally, so I've put this in here because this was for some specific meetings. I almost always vote no to lay on the table and postpone. My reason for that is we have brought people together to do business, and in respect of their time, let's do the business today. Let's not keep pushing it down the road, delaying it. These people are here, let's do business, win or lose. So strategically, there are limited opportunities to lay on the reasons to lay on the table or postpone, but I rarely use it because I want to value those people who made the trip. And let's do some business today. And if we have a problem, let's find a way together to solve it. We can amend it. We can postpone it 30 minutes. We can rewrite it and bring it back. Like there's all kinds of ways to do it, but let's not just get rid of business because we're not comfortable. Let's be big people, read this stuff and do business together. This is confined remarks. So this is when someone says, point of information, you are recognized. Did the chairman allow you to do this and this and this? And was this email correct? And did this? And they're just going on and they're debating or talking about something that doesn't actually have to do with what you're doing. Just because they're trying to get the floor. And so you can actually do a point of order on another member. So this one is written, I make the point of order that the member's remarks has nothing to do with the motion or not germane. So germane means having to do with the same topic. And then the chairman can then rule on that. So you can do a point of order on a member who's out of order. And then if a member is breaking there's rules in Roberts of what a member should be allowed to do. You can't question the motives of members. You can't mention people by name. You can't speak on irrelevant matters. If that continues happening, Mr. Chairman, I call the member to order. And then the chairman will take your point of order. If it's well taken, they'll tell that member to sit down. And then if it continues happening, usually they get 3 warnings. The assembly can then vote to remove them. I've never been in a meeting where this has actually gotten to that point, but we have had to call members to order. And it's just a good warning to be like, be on the team and play to do business, or you need to not be here right now. It's just a temporary move. It doesn't take them off the committee or take away their position or censure them. It's just they're not allowed to be here because they're taking away the ability of this committee to do business, which is what we all came here to do. And the last one that I put on here because I feel like it's so important, because a lot of people want to say, well, customarily, we've done this or this. And so I just put the paragraph. This is not actually from this Robert's Rules book. There's a little yellow book, a shortened version of it that I feel like for this particular rule is easier to read. Sometimes a group gets into the habit of doing something in the same way over and over again until it becomes an established custom. It comes to be followed practically as if it were a written rule. No matter how long established a custom is, however, it can never conflict with a written rule. And if the conflict is pointed out, the written rule must be followed unless it is amended to incorporate the custom. And so this is just, again, helpful if a chairman is trying to say, well, we've always done it this way. We've always done it this way doesn't work if Robert's Rules of Order or the OKGOP bylaws have a way it should work. And with, almost, what are there? There's over 600 pages in this book. It's going to cover most scenarios that you run into. So I think that's all. What I didn't get into is all of the specifics on how to set meetings and how to write minutes and how to hold conventions and how to credential and how to have elections and how to do ballots. And so I just want you to know Robert's Rules of Order contains all of that. It's very helpful. Those chapters are better read than just explained on a call. These underlying principles, one thing I want to say about conventions, these underlying principles apply not just to committees, but conventions. So if you go read the chapter on conventions, it specifies the credentialing process for conventions and some of the timing of the events, but points of order, divisions, all of these other parliamentary principles still apply. Because the convention is almost like a group of people that gathers less frequently than a committee, but we all still have the rights that we have on a committee or something else to direct. And in the OKGOP, the convention is actually the highest authority, and the committees fall under that.